Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. So at this time of the year, myself and Debbie and the Sangha get a 2-week period in the forest in our kutis in seclusion, and I've had that and just finished that this evening. It's a favorite time of year for me because I like the quiet, I like the seclusion, I like nature. I like that, it's not going to sound so great, but I like the time when there's no interaction, there's no, pretty much no speech. And we come down if we're wanting to take the meal and go into the kitchen and get the meal without, in my case, without seeing anybody. So I find that the mind can just become really much, much quieter. And just very simple things can become quite enchanting. I have I think quite a few of us have a little bowl that we put out water for some of the creatures in the forest. And I think it's just an example of how you can make an offering, but you never actually know how many people are benefiting from it. Because I would normally fill up this bowl and then not be at my kuti, so I wouldn't see that over the period of a day and a night, there might be 50, 60, 70 creatures that come along, and there's woodpeckers and blue jays and chickadees and squirrels. And then this evening, I don't know much about foxes, but I just know that I'll glimpse a fox. I won't often see a fox for very long, just a few seconds. Before I came down, I saw the fox out the back of my kuti, and so I quickly went to the front to look out the window to see what it was doing. And it came along and went near the bowl, and I thought, it's going to have a drink of water. But it didn't do that. It went over the bowl and then urinated in the bowl of water. So for some reason, every morning I had this feeling like I wanted to give the creatures a fresh bowl of water. I'd always empty it out, and now I'm figuring that was kind of a good thing to do. And then one morning I was sitting, I think, just outside, and this group of quail came along. I don't know if you're familiar with quail, but there were 7 quail. They came along, they're in a line, and then they get to the bowl, and they move around the bowl so that they're equally distributed right around the bowl. No one's drinking yet. And then they all drink all at the same time, waiting till they're all in place. I'm like, monastics. So it's been a very difficult year for me. I had, just over a year ago, my mother took a big dive in her health, and I went down to New Zealand for a while, and then in January she did that again. By this time she was in care. I went back in January. My grandson was born in January. I went back, and I was there late January. My mother died February 17. I got to spend some time with her in the care facility she was in. I was packing up, clearing out their family home, getting it ready for the sale. It sold in June. lots and lots of changes, lots of kind of really focused work, getting things in order down there, and then coming back here in March, kind of being fine, and then probably sometime in May, June, July, I had a lot of grief. And it was sort of complicated because when I was around my mum, I wasn't a good, patient, kind, caring Buddhist daughter. I could be sometimes, but other times I wasn't. And she wasn't a good, kind, caring, patient mother. She didn't like that she was, in the end, immobile in a chair. She got pretty frustrated about that. And she wasn't a very good patient. So I had regrets. I had some things that I wish I hadn't said. I had some things that I wish I had said. And I'm not really a stranger to grief. My husband died of a brain tumor quite some time ago. And if you haven't experienced kind of a deep grieving period, then for those who haven't, it can be really discombobulating. It can be like being in a fog. It can be like being very, very forgetful, very vague, very isolated, feeling that no one quite understands what you're going through, and that people don't really want to know either, which may or may not be true. And disorientating. And the death of my mother was disorientating in a way that I would never have expected. So I just wanted to say a few things about what I found helpful with the practice, because I think that when we're going along and things are fine, then the practice is one thing, but when it's rough and when it's tough, then I'm always interested myself to know what people put in place, what they're using to get through those times. So I think there's a couple of ways of looking at it. For me, there's kind of the specifics, and then there's something that's more sort of general. And with the specifics, I think that when we're different characters, we're different personalities, we have different attitudes and different underlying tendencies, different kind of ways that the defilements come up to challenge us. But I found that being around the Dhamma, I've done 12 years now of this kind of life, monasteries and managing a retreat centre in Australia. And I think when something really strikes you about the Dhamma, when you hear it, when you feel it, when you read it, it's a bit of a sign that this is something that, for whatever reason, is good to put into practice, to utilize as much as possible. So when I met Ajahn Chandako about 10 years ago and did a retreat with him, and he led us through a guided meditation on taking the body apart and putting it back together again. So you take the hair off the head, the hair off the body, and put it in a pile. You'd visualize this. Take the eyes out, put them in a pile, and you go through every part of the body until there's the bones, and you sort of like have this pile of bones, and then, where is Beth? There's these piles. There's all of these pieces, but where is Beth? That really struck me. And then you put it all back together again. But I think then in reading some of the suttas, there's some pieces where they talk about, all the lifetimes that we've had. If you piled up all the bones from all the lifetimes, all the different creatures we may have been, and that would be a mass as high as, say, the Himalayas. So then I would incorporate that as well. So I'd have myself, this particular set of bones, and then that would be put in front of this mountain of bones. And why would one do that? I think it's it's just really useful to get away from the appearance of things, of this, thinking that this is permanent, this is everlasting, this is a solid entity, we're all going to die, we're all actually, all of these different pieces of bodies. And we've been doing this for a very, very long time. So something like that can act as quite a powerful motivating force to try and move as far as possible in this particular lifetime towards realizing the Dhamma. And Ajahn Siri recently reminded us of the teaching of the vast ocean, and if there's a blind turtle that comes out in the whole of the ocean and manages to put its head in a wooden yoke, that's the sort of likelihood we have of having a human life. So I need these vast kind of, for some reason, the vastness of that, and the unlikelihood of that is really, you just really got to make the most of this time in whatever way we can. I've been reading through, I have to do some study for something, and I have to do a long research paper on research on the suttas, and I've been looking at the Sutta Nikaya. There's a sutta called the dart, when it's saying that a person that's seeking happiness needs to take the dart they have stuck in themselves, take out the dart they've stuck in themselves. And that again is something that really strikes me. It's the arrowhead of grieving, of despair, of desiring. Because of the self-responsibility, it's like we're the ones that are doing this to ourselves over and over and over again. However it is, however the desire is arising. And another thing that I found out just very recently, just before going on a retreat, is that after getting the green card in August and thinking that would take care of my immigration issues that I've had for the 6 years I've been here, never knowing if I could stay or not, about 10 days later I found out I have to go back to live in New Zealand. I have to leave in the spring. It's related to eligibility for the pension there. So I found that in the initial part in the forest, there was just a lot of becoming mind, a lot of thinking about that. I need to get a job, I need to work, I'm trying to see if I can shore up some of my credentials as a chaplain. I'd like to work with hospice and grief and bereavement, because I found them to be such powerful teachers for myself. But that becoming mind is just very, very noisy. And there's another piece, I remember reading it in the island, that says something like the anguish of life, even the self is unsatisfactory. Every fact that we conceive of is ever other than that. So I was like, this becoming mind, this, that, planning, do, da, who knows? It's just like every fact that I'm conceiving of is ever other than that. Ever other than that. So why? Why do it? It's over and over and over again, this endless wandering around the mind, thinking, planning, fantasizing. I mean, maybe I'll never get to even make it through the winter. Who knows? So I think what I found is that, when it's rough, it's using those things that really strike at the heart, that really, for whatever reason, those little verses, teachings, they're the things I think that will carry, that help to carry me through. Because I went back in August to spend a couple of weeks with my daughter and grandson and had just such a lovely time. It was very, very healing. Just seeing the way that the generations go on. it's my stepbrother said with my mum dying, it's like the end of an era. And I'm an elder now. There's in the whole kind of normal scheme of things, there's no one between me and death. And yet there's a little being now, 8, 9 months old. Of course, quite adorable if you're the grandmother. So I'm conscious that there's a lot of other people here to share tonight. I just want to leave you with a little piece that I read from the Nālaka Sutta. And Nālaka has asked the Buddha to tell him about the highest state of wisdom. And the Buddha says quite a few things, but near the end, I just want to say it's just so beautiful. He's talking about, and I guess it came to mind because having that time in the forest and the mind getting quiet, in that quiet, there's an ending of things. There's an ending of that compulsion to think and to seek and ever seeking fresh delight, now here, now there. And it's just possible now and again to get a glimpse of that quiet, that still. And the Buddha is saying that there's this wisdom of silence. And the pieces that I particularly liked were listen to the sound of the water. Listen to the water running through the chasms and rocks. It is the minor streams that make a loud noise. The great waters flow silently. The hollow resounds, and the full is still. Foolishness is like a half. Foolishness is like a jar half full. A wise person is a lake full of water. Thank you.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammam Sangham Namasami. I guess I get to see how the other sandal fits here, being up here, giving some reflections. Well, for me, it's coming close to the end of my Anagārika year here, and so I guess I should maybe give some reflections on that experience. It's I guess being in Anagārika, it's we're kind of in service to the bhikkhus, doing things for the monks that they can't do for themselves. We prepare food and offer food, and handle money, and drive to the airport, and it's a beautiful thing. It's been a kind of a tonic for me in kind of overcoming selfishness and preferences and just that sense of self in general, just to give myself to being more in service than I've ever been, and it just leaves me with a good feeling at the end of it, a good wholesome feeling, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be in that role, and it's I guess being in Anagārika, it's it's a lot of different things. We're 8 precept lay people still, and so we're kind of in training, and yet still kind of more in contact with the world than the bhikkhus are, and which can lead to kind of challenges and kind of a dichotomy, and stirs up all kinds of things. And on top of that, you have to wear white. So you wrap all that in white cloth, and it kind of, it's kind of a rite of passage, it seems. And the path leads through the kitchen too. And some people have called it a pressure cooker, and I think in our case it's maybe more like a hot wok. And I know for myself, it's a lot of the value of my practice I've kind of gained over this last year, and some has been in that kitchen, just through all the incredible varied experiences that you can encounter in a kitchen, with different combinations of people every day, it seems, in there, and all the different comings and goings, and special days or big days, and just doing our best to present a adequate amount of nourishment and healthy nourishment, maybe with a few treats in there, and not losing your mind in the process of doing that. Or sometimes I felt like I came pretty close a few times to blowing some rivets, but I'm very grateful for the experience, and it seems now that I'm getting close to the end of my time in the kitchen, at least in this capacity. I feel like I'm kind of figuring it out more, and the biggest obstacle in there was just myself, and just that sense of self. All the things that come with when I hold a view of a self too strongly, and for me, that's kind of having control issues, and things needing to be done just a particular way, and how it's going to reflect on me, and I know better than you, and or no, all these different things that that kind of maybe they worked pretty good out in lay life in my occupation, but they weren't appropriate or entirely wholesome to be used here, and so it's been a retraining for myself, and I feel like I've come a long way, but I can see there's a long way to go yet. I also like to just express my gratitude to my partner in being in Anagārika Ryan, just for being just a hardworking, good-hearted individual. that made this experience a lot easier than it could have been. And along with the novices to Sāmaṇera Gunawiro and Tissaro and Tissaro we shared 6 months of being Anagārikas together, and it was I was quite fortunate in my Anagārika year to have my 3 senior, younger, but big brothers looking out for me and kind of helping me, helping the old guy out. And it's very, very touching, very moving, and it's something I won't forget. Working in the kitchen, I like to kind of compare it to, it's like a proving ground for my practice. I could be up in my kuti and, listening to the breeze and the birds and just being very sabai, and everything just seems right. It's very bright, beautiful mind states going on, and it seems like something's really going on here. And then to take that down to the kitchen and see how it works out, and many times I kind of fell on my face with it as that mind state would evaporate, and then I started learning about patient. The patient endurance and the willingness to pick oneself up repeatedly, and trying not to take it all so personally as I tend to do.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namasāmi. This is really special, this little gathering. Every once in a while, we have a large group of people in the meditation hall. I'll take a peek and just look at a room full of people just sitting there quietly with their eyes closed. People from all different walks of life with different views of the world and different preferences and hobbies, and all these unique individuals who come together to practice. That's really where the value comes from, is the practice. Not just just talking about it. Although that's really helpful too. I was in the kitchen this evening with a group of guys and just talking Dhamma, just talking about our practice, and it's really encouraging to just have friends, monastic friends, and lay friends who see the value in this work. The value in kind of taking the time to stop, close one's eyes, sit down, and just observe, and just watch what's going on. It's so easy to just miss it, just not to see clearly when we're kind of running after things or running away from things. So it's just to kind of stop and sit and observe, and to be able to do that with a group of people it's helpful. Like we're on a sports team together, but we all have to do our own sprints. Nobody can do it for us, so we all have to do the work. But to kind of come together and practice together, it makes the work a little easier, I find. One of the things I really find beneficial about the Abhayagiri schedule is we start off in the morning and we have these work periods, and we do these work periods with members from the lay community that come and spend time here. Some regulars and often people who just come from all over, who've never been here before, and we'll work on a project. And, everybody's got their opinions about how things should be done. And it can be challenging sometimes. And then you finish up the work period and you go up to you have the meal and clean up, and then you go up to your kuti and you get to sit. You get to stop and sit, walk, and just practice and be still. And when you're in the kind of the work period and you have this kind of external stimuli, these people, these conditions, you're working on a project, it's easy to kind of think, oh man, if this guy just got it together, man, if this project wasn't so hard, if I hadn't gotten sucked into doing this project, I'd be much happier. It's easy to kind of point outwards and kind of blame the discontent on these things, but then you go up to your kuti and you sit down and you close your eyes and cross your legs, and it's a little harder to convince yourself that it's that guy's fault if the discontent arises. It can certainly be done, but I can only kind of sit up there and blame things on somebody else or on another circumstance for so long. And that seems like such a valuable shift whenever that occurs, where I see there's a story There's a story that's being told in my mind that I'm believing is the cause of my agitation. And when I see that it's kind of this story, then it's a little easier to see the condition as opposed to the specifics of whatever the story is, and just see the nature of believing it. And kind of the discontent that comes from believing this story to be true. So having kind of that, a simple meditation object like the respiration, and coming back to that, and when I'm not identifying with whatever the story is, I kind of come back to the breath. And then, but the kind of the discontent is still there. I'm just not pointing outwards towards the story, towards the thing I'm saying is causing discontent. There's just kind of this feeling, this uncomfortable feeling. It's hard to just be there sometimes with the discomfort. But that getting that time kind of up in the kuti just to sit and be still. It makes it more clear what's causing it. And it's usually either the story or just wanting it not to be there. It's wanting somebody to be different, or wanting a circumstance to be different, or wanting not to feel it. But it's always kind of wanting it to be something other than what it is. And then a lot of times it'll switch to wanting me to be different. I should be a more diligent practitioner. I want to be a more diligent practitioner. And so there's the desire to be better. I come up with a new story. A story about me being a person who is diligent and can overcome suffering. And this whole story is just making me suffer more. It's such a sneaky flow, kind of this flow of craving, and there's really so much benefit to this life because it kind of limits the objects that it can flow around to. So, in the world, I could go to movies, go to food, go to friends, go to this, go to that, and it was kind of harder to see. But here it's, it's meal, tea, meal, tea, meal, tea, meal, tea, meal, tea, meal, tea, meal, tea. How kind of it becomes pretty obvious. But it's still kind of this consistent flow. It's funny to watch too, because I'll see it where tea time's over, so now it's meal. Think about the meal, and I want, let's just say mangoes. Well, let's say donuts. Say something a little tastier. And so the desire comes up. I want this. I want this, I want this, I want this. I want donuts, I want donuts, I want donuts, I want donuts, I want donuts. Until you get to the line, you get them. They're in your bowl. You're walking to your seat. I want donuts. I want donuts. You say the chant. Your mouth is salivating. I want. And then, you get it. You get the sense pleasure, and everything else, maybe a little too much. And then immediately once that want is satisfied, it shifts to, I want to be more restrained. I want to be more restrained. I want to be more restrained. I want to be better. 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 And so the kind of that flow of just wanting shifts from wanting kind of that sense pleasure, wanting sense pleasure, wanting sense pleasure. I get it. And then I want to be something different. I want to be somebody who doesn't indulge in sense pleasures. I want to be somebody who doesn't indulge in sense pleasures. And then I want to not do this tomorrow. I want to not do this tomorrow. And then that flows. And then wake up. I want to not do that again. I want to not do that again. I want to not do that again. I want donuts. I want to not do that again. I want to not do that again. I want donuts. I want to not do that again. I want donuts. 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 And then it just shifts back to, some sort of sense pleasure. And so it just kind of flows, just seamlessly flows through these things from, wanting to chase after this to wanting to not be bound up by chasing those things. And boy, that's dukkha. And that's really so much, the first two noble truths. Dukkha, it's cause. It's craving. I want. Dukkha, it's cause. And there's a lot of gratitude that comes up for those other two noble truths. That there's a cessation of that constant cycle of wanting things, wanting to be different, wanting to be somebody, wanting somebody else to be different. The object is kind of irrelevant. This causes so much discontent, but then there's other causes that we can put into place that allow that to cease. And kind of being with a community of people who see so much value in putting in those causes and conditions is really encouraging, because it seems like most people encourage us to put in the causes and conditions for the other two, the suffering. I was doing walking meditation in this hall during the winter retreat. It wasn't complete yet, and it was pretty late at night. And I was walking back and forth in here, and I thought, I don't remember what was on my mind, but it was something just about, what was going on in the world. And I realized that the world was just, at this point in this hall, the world was just an idea that I had in my head. I just had a concept of the way things were. That for all really I knew in this moment, this building could be floating in a void. Looking at the windows, it's all dark. My idea of the world is certainly wrong. But I realized I was carrying my idea of the world back and forth with me, walking meditation. And I just thought, man, what a weight to be carrying back and forth. Just this idea of the way things are. And how much this idea weighs me down and prevents me from being at ease. So I don't know. I've seen the benefit in just dropping the stories and trying to catch it when the stories come up. That they're just my own little interpretations, my own biased interpretations of the way things are, the way things should be, the way I should be. And they can be dropped. And there's things that can be done to kind of stop that endless flow of desire. And kind of like Ajahn Seik was talking about, just continuing to put forth effort to create those causes and conditions which allow the inertia of that kind of incessant seeking to just slowly subside and settle down, and eventually stop. And I think I'll stop right there.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Sanghaṃ Namasami. I arrived at Abhayagiri to come and live here about a year ago, almost exactly. And this Pavāraṇā gathering was one of the first Dhamma events I saw here, and I was very impressed by it, as I am also today. Impressed by the sincerity and truthfulness and what should I say? Goodness, which I saw in the members of the community here. I've had a little different path to this monastery than the other venerable monks here. I was a Mahayana monk in South Korea for 7 years, originally from the Midwest. Went over there to study Buddhism, become a monk, practice, and then started becoming interested in the Theravada tradition, especially the Ajahn Chah tradition. So many of you know there's two main schools of Buddhism when you look at Buddhism in the world, Mahayana and Theravada. And so they split apart about 2,000 years ago. And historically they split, and there wasn't much contact after that, so they developed in different ways. But what's really interesting to see is the core of the Buddha's teaching, and how I understand it, really was passed on in both traditions. And though it expresses itself in different ways, it's still present to this day, present at this monastery, still present in this community, and it's something that we can have faith and confidence in, develop understanding of, and put into practice and see for ourselves. So for myself, as I've been practicing or studying Buddhism, or since my interest in Buddhism started, I've gone in different directions and tried this and that, different practices, different approaches. But what I've come to find most beneficial and what has come to help me the most, help me make sense of what is my life, what's going on, who am I, where does happiness, where does sadness come from, and what's the correct direction to go in life. The two things that have been most helpful for me to see are the importance of what we call sila, ethical conduct, my everyday conduct, body and speech and mind. That and what the Buddha called right view, seeing clearly the nature of the mind, which is at the same time the nature of the world. So without going into too much detail, I just saw more and more that it's not about how long I'm meditating or various kind of external manifestations, whatever it look. We try different practices and there's the external form of them. But what actions throughout my daily life, how I'm relating to other people, all the actions I'm doing, and understanding there's this ethical difference in the way that we can experience life and create actions. What the Buddha called kusala and akusala, wholesome and unwholesome, beneficial and unbeneficial. And as we reflect on ourselves and see what's going on in our minds, we see that sometimes our actions and our habits propel us to follow things or run away from things, push or pull. And there's a real kind of tightness and some fear there. And we're impelled by habit in these directions, but the further we go down those roads, the worse it gets. We create problems with other people. And we feel it in our bodies. Our bodies tighten up. Anxiety, anger, these sort of things are both states of the mind and states of the body. And the more we react in those ways, the more I reacted in those ways, really I could just see myself like closing in, my own kind of getting more and more lost in my own world, kind of building walls. But this other way that the Buddha is trying to show us, what he called kusala, beneficial, wholesome, it's another way of going with our minds. That although it can be difficult at first, little by little, it's very freeing. And these walls of separation drop off little by little. Our relationships with other people improve. And the body gets relaxed, peaceful. This is, of course, what the Buddha was trying to show us with the teaching of the precepts. rather than killing, being compassionate, beneficial to all creatures, rather than stealing or covetousness, sharing and giving, being generous, and so forth. The negative and the positive aspects of all these different interactions we have in our life. And little by little, as I tried to move in a more wholesome direction, things really improved, regardless of how many hours a day I was sitting or how I was studying or these other things, which are of course important, but it was the time off the meditation cushion, perhaps, more so than on the meditation cushion, that really determined how my practice went. So it's like the teaching of the Buddha, the real summary of the Dhamma. It's very beautiful. I don't know the Pali, but it's not doing any unwholesome actions, cultivating all that is good, and purifying one's mind. This is the teaching of the awakened ones. It's really simple, but very hard to do. But little by little, as we put in the effort there, the mind grows more peaceful, and right view, which I talked about, the other aspect of the other aspect which helped me, it begins to deepen. And so there's different levels to it, of course, but first we start off with a faith in the three treasures, cause and effect, these sort of things. But as our practice deepens, or my practice, I saw deeper into how the mind works and what the Buddha is talking about, especially with the Four Noble Truths and such like this. So I'll just leave you with a teaching. I'll share it with you and maybe say a few words. It's actually teaching from the Zen tradition. So for those of you who aren't so familiar with Zen or Chan Buddhism, the great masters in those traditions are like kind of like the Kruba Ajahns, the forest masters, in the Thai or the Theravadan traditions. Really, those who saw the limits in just a mere scholastic approach to the Dhamma. Many of them studied all the text and understood everything philosophically, but realized that cooking the meal and tasting the food is a lot different than reading the recipes all day. So a lot of them, they burned their books or whatever, went into the forest or into the mountains, and really investigated themselves deeply. Anyway, the difference that I see, though, this is interesting, is that in the Chan or the Zen tradition, Chan is the Chinese word, Japanese says Zen, they really emphasize the goal or the kind of culmination of the path. Whereas the Buddha was always talking about things, really emphasizing the path and step by step, and only really describing the goal, nibbana, not so much, because it's something that, if we're not there or close to it, it's really hard to see. But the Chan masters really talked about it a lot, and really gave teachings that kind of difficult to understand. With that being said, one of them is, let me just share it with you real quick. Attaining the way is not difficult. Simply avoid picking and choosing. When attraction and aversion are stopped, everything is perfectly clear. It's very simple, maybe 12 Chinese characters or something. But it's really pointing to the same thing that the Buddha was talking about in the Four Noble Truths, as far as I understand it. That it's our attachment to and aversion to different aspects of our experience, pushing things away, running towards other things, it's this way of relating to what's going on in our minds, what's going on around us. That's precisely the dukkha the Buddha talked about. But yet if we see through all that and we see that for what it is, if we see our thoughts as just thoughts, feelings as just feelings, if we understand all the stories as merely stories, there's a way we can be free from those things even without pushing them away or trying to get rid of them. Even in the midst of all that, we can know it for what it is, and letting go can happen. And the last line, if we don't follow attraction and aversion, everything can be perfectly clear. It's something we can experience a little bit, moment by moment. It's not complete in our lives until we fully develop it. But it's, as I understand what the Buddha was talking about, the Dhamma that's visible here and now. I think it's Sanditiko Dhamma. The Dhamma that's visible here and now that we all can see when we're not caught up in what's arising in our minds, when we see it for what it is. So, yeah, that's just a real teaching that was really helpful to me, how I understand it, how I see the connection between the Mahayana tradition and the Theravada tradition. And I just wanted to say that the year that I've spent here so far, and I intend to continue to practice here, it's been very beneficial, very nourishing, inspiring for me, seeing the sincerity and dedication of all the members of the community, and seeing the compassionate, wise leadership of this community, the vision of Longpo Pasano, and very grateful to be here. So I'll leave these words for your reflection tonight.
Maybe we could have just a bit of a break, stretch our legs, use the facilities, come back for some more Dhamma. Get casa, no way.